Hello, and welcome to the Slow Ready podcast, a casual conversation about all things Goose. I'm Alex.
And I'm Mike.
And we made this show with the vision that it can be a fun, slow dive into the music, culture, and fan experience of our favorite band, Goose. So whether you're a brand new fan, you've been to 100 shows, or you're just Goose curious, we hope to have something for you. We got lots of fun topics planned for future episodes, so be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow our socials at SlowReadyPod on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and X. In today's inaugural episode, we thought it'd be fun to introduce ourselves to you and then dive into our main topic, the best songs to introduce a brand new Goose fan to. With all that, let's get into it. Mike, how about you let everyone know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Mike. I'm from North Carolina. I've been following the jam band scene for most of my life since I was around 14 years old or so. And I got started with Goose around the end of COVID. I wish it was earlier, but it is what it is. I saw their performance of Seekers on the Ridge, parts 1 and 2, at the top of the Rockefeller Center for Goosemas at the tail end of COVID there. And if you've seen that video, you know how amazing that performance is. So I put it on my radar to, okay, we definitely need to get more information on these boys. And I totally forgot about them for a full year. And then just by chance, I happened to see a mutual acquaintance post on their story the song So Ready about a year later. And funk is my favorite genre, and I just love fun, funky music. And So Ready is definitely that. So I got back around to them, checked out their entire catalog, find out that they pretty much don't make any bad songs whatsoever, and just fell completely head over heels with this band. And then, of course, I went to my first Goosemas last year, and that truly escalated my level of fandom, because if you've ever been to one of their concerts, you know it's like they start playing, there's a bolt of electricity, and you blink and it's over, and you're on a cloud floating to your car. So that changed me forever. I've caught a few more shows since then, and am just fully down the Goose rabbit hole and can't wait to dig deeper on it, and can't think of a better way to do that than starting this podcast with my good buddy here. So that's kind of a little bit about me. So why don't you tell us a little about your journey with Alex?
Sure. Hey, I'm Alex. I live in southern New Jersey, and I've always kind of been drawn to rock music and indie rock since I was young, and started getting into the jam band scene when I was in my 20s. And I first heard about Goose probably around the time that singles for Dripfield were coming out. Had a lot of friends tuned in to the jam band scene heavily, and they were absolutely raving about Goose. Probably before that to me, and I just wasn't paying attention. And I started listening after that, and really through their live cuts, and really, really loved what I heard. Particularly the Alive and Well album, or they have a live release from Buffalo that was one of their earliest releases, and I listened to that thing over and over again. My wife and I, we had tickets to go see them on the Tab and Goose tour in 2022, and had some scheduling conflicts and couldn't make it, so we haven't gotten out to see them until this year. And we were already super sold on Goose, but that really cemented it as the only thing I really want to talk about and think about. And I had already been that way before that, and it just really solidified that. So Mike and I have been thinking about a forum to discuss music in general in some way since we became friends. And after seeing our shows this summer, this seemed like the perfect way to do that. So I'm just glad we both have the same passionate experiences with this band, and we hope that we can bring that to you guys.
Without a doubt.
With all that, I thought we'd get into our first topic, and we thought we'd do something light and fun. And we wanted to have an introduction to the band for a new Goose fan. So Mike and I each made 5 picks of songs we thought would be good to introduce someone who maybe has a little bit of experience with the band or no experience at all, and walk them through kind of some of these songs that we think are great. And with that, we'll start with Mike's first pick.
Yeah, so my first pick, I think some people would find kind of obvious, and it is obvious. It's Arcadia, and I would choose it probably 100 times out of 100 to introduce a new fan to. I think most of the time when I think about Goose, Arcadia is the first thing that's popping into my head. It is catchy, it is funky. They display every single ounce of dynamism that's inside this band, where Arcadia Live can just take on new meanings and new directions constantly. But no matter what form Arcadia is in, it is just a totally energetic, bonkers good time. So that absolutely had to be my first pick, and there wasn't really anything else even in the running.
Oh yeah. So let's dive into it a little bit. It's absolutely the gateway song for so many of the fans that you already see at shows, and it's definitely the song in my experience that works for really roping people in. Has just such a signature sound to it, and it's one of those songs that even though it's their most popular song, all the diehard fans still absolutely rave about it and are excited to see it at shows. Like you said, it's got a great hook to it. It's really kind of a uniquely structured song, one chord chorus that's really driven by the vocals, and you can hear the harmonies between the vocalists Peter and Rick throughout that, and it just is really a unique sound that this band offers, and you can almost hear some of the funk and soul feel to it, and even a little bit of the indie vibes at times during the song. And yeah, it was really interesting to go back to the studio cut and hear the differences between the live sound, which is how I was introduced to it, and there's a lot to take away from both. It's really evolved ever since that live cut from 2015.
Absolutely. And the studio cut, I think, leans a little bit more into that like Cali, 311 type vibe sound, white boy reggae, whatever you want to call it. But when it goes live, you definitely see it take on new dynamic forms constantly where it gets really swampy, it gets rock and blues, it's always Arcadia, but it's always just a ton of fun, and they're always maximizing the potential of that song. And it definitely also always gives Trevor a chance to shine, which is I think most of us will take any time we get to see that.
And that's something I think we're going to be saying a lot today. And just want to shout out one last point to definitely check out the first track on Alive and Well. It's from the Peach Fest show in 2019, the infamous or maybe famous Peach show, where a lot of people really had this band put on their radar, and it's just an absolutely killer version of the song.
With Rick sitting down, which makes it even more impressive.
Yeah, bum knee Rick just ripping on his PRS guitar for sure.
Just killing it.
So I thought I'd get into my first song here, and I picked Hunger Sight off of Dripfield. And
Awesome pick.
this is just one of those really classic sounding songs. It's got such an iconic riff, and it really sticks with you. It's one of those songs you hear it once, and that riff will be in your head without a doubt. It's almost something that you might consider like a classic rock sound in some ways. Like you could totally hear yourself hearing this song in previous decades or something like that. But it also has a little bit of everything that you'd want out of Goose in it. It's got a really melodic feel to it. It's got crazy guitar solos. It's got the great songwriting aspect of really deep lyrics with themes that aren't beating you over the head. And it's one of those songs that I think it translates really well into the studio from the live setting to where you're not feeling like you're only hearing a snippet of what should be the full song. You're really getting the full spectrum of the whole song. You're getting the crazy Rick guitar solo, even though it's not 20 minutes long like you'd get at a concert. It's still really, really solid performance, and you feel like you've gotten the full scope of it.
Absolutely, totally agree. This song just barely missed my top 5 list for this, so it was definitely heavily under consideration, and I totally agree with all of your points. I think that's something that's really cool and stands out about Goose's catalog as you go through it is just that they're such good songwriters, and that's not something that you always see in the jam band world. You find lots of bands that are really great at jamming, and they have some good songs or a few good songs, but this song is wildly different to the last song we were talking about, Arcadia. And it's just no matter what type of music they're trying to tackle with their songwriting, they excel at it. And they made an amazing song here that I totally agree could exist in multiple decades. You could have seen multiple rock artists of yesteryear. I could even imagine it being part of the Dead's catalog at different points or something along those lines. So just another fantastic song. Totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you got next, buddy?
Yeah, so the next song I went with, I originally did not have it on the list because I thought we, in truth, were just making a top 5 of Goose songs, but this wasn't on the list, but I added in the list specifically for this purpose, and it's Born, which I feel like is just a really hard song to deny its greatness and brilliance. It's very serious and heavy, but it's also like complete ear candy. It feels like you could hear this on top 40 radio, again, kind of like at any time point. And what I find most interesting about it is I have lots of people that are, quote, the saying on the internet, not sold on Goose quite yet, that even though they maintain that position, at least with the song Born, they have to acknowledge, okay, this is just a really, really well written song. And, I can't really say that I hate this. So I'm sure there are Born haters out there. I have not found them yet. So it absolutely had to go on the list for this purpose.
Yeah, and this is another one of those songs, kind of like echoing what we said before. It touches on so many different genres in like the most slight, subtle ways. Definitely more of the indie side of their indie groove description the band self describes themselves as. You almost get like My Morning Jacket kind of vibes at times, and you get a really nice slide feel and kind of country feel subtly in the background of the main hook. And then at other times you get kind of like a shoegazer, like really indie blues rock kind of vibe. And this is one of those songs where I actually was introduced to it through the music video of it, and that's a highlight of this band as well, where they just have insane production value. Simple filming and music videos, but really clean, really well done, and you can really feel the story of the song being told through this.
Absolutely. That video is arguably as powerful as the song. And I forget about the video constantly because, typically when you're a Goose fan, you're listening to a ton of live versions. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also add on Born, maybe out of their entire catalog, at least in the live setting, the biggest chameleon of them all. Because if you start digging into live Borns, it's an adventure that goes all over the place. So, yeah, great song, great video. Had to be on the list of five I would introduce to someone with.
Yeah, for sure. And just one last point is it was interesting you hearing you say that you thought this was a top 5 list and then you switched it up and added Born, and that just is a testament to this band and how it's really not that different of a list in terms of like great songs to introduce someone to and also some of their best songs. So that's an awesome part about this band. It's not hashtag deep cuts only or anything like that.
No, top to bottom, brilliant.
Uh, so for my next song, I thought I'd go with a live cut, and so far
Okay.
it's a live only track, really catchy, definitely more fitting with the jam band scene, and I would go with Animal, where it's got just such a crazy catchy hook. You really hear that bass line. You hear both of the percussionists in the band really highlighted, whether it's hand drumming or just standard traditional drum set drumming. It's got that jam band vibe of like the lyrics are kind of nonsense, but they're fun, and it's just killer. You can get like a big spectrum of different lengths to this song. Sometimes it's nice and short, and you can maybe show that to someone new so you don't overwhelm them. And then sometimes you get really long, drawn out jams depending on where it is in the set. And if you have a song where you can get Animal from the Muppets to guest on it, it's one of the big highlights of this band of all time. You can't beat that.
Absolutely, definitely agree. Animal is such a fun vibe, especially if you were lucky enough to be at that performance with Animal the Muppet. I mean, insane. And I think it's really cool too. I'm sure this will occur more as we go through the list of songs here, but I think what you see with their catalog is just it's always the theme is endless diversity. It doesn't matter what they're trying to do, like it's always something new. And we've had a couple songs already that we've discussed that have pretty heavy serious hitting lyrics, and then you've got the lyrics of Animal, which is a complete and utter contrast, different goal for the song, but whatever they're going for, they nail it.
Yeah, definitely. Feel good, easy listening, but also so much intricacy behind it. What's not to love?
100%. It's so fun. Dance party.
Yeah, funk dance party for sure. So let's see if we touch on another genre here. What do you got next?
Yeah, that might be the theme, but sort of, kind of. I picked Turn Clouds next, which I think is very much just most of the core of the song is just a fun poppy song, but then it has this brilliant third act that, at least when you're listening to it the first time, I didn't anyway, see this third act coming in the song that just completely changes the direction. There's this giant bridge that seemingly came from out of nowhere, an explosion of energy, and then it kind of transforms again towards the end of the song. And I think it's a really good example of how, even when they make a song like Turn Clouds that is just infectiously catchy and you want to tap your feet to it right away, they're still like, oh hey, it's Goose, there's a new wrinkle here at the end. And they always pull it off. So I feel like it's a good, if you're getting someone started with this band, like, if you're going to be a Goose fan, there's going to be some exploration, and I think this is kind of a fun way to dip your toe into that end of it.
Yeah, and honestly, I think at the time it was recorded, Goose probably felt the same way because it's the first track on their first studio album, you know? Absolutely killer impression. Really smacks you in the face right away with Rick's vocal range. And, you mentioned that 3rd act of the song, and even though Peter, one of the vocalists and the keys player, and he also plays some guitar for the band, he wasn't in the band at the time, you can hear that influence still to this day of how that was played in that studio cut, and they stick true to that sound. It's just an insane ending and really gives you a little bit of, like, that even proggy kind of Pink Floyd vibe you might hear sometimes with this band, so definitely a solid pick, and like I said, it's the first song you're gonna hear if you go from front to back with the studio cuts, so great choice.
It's also a little bit like of a take you to church moment there at the end. It's just bursting with soul, the organ and everything. I mean, it's just it's wild. What do you have next, Alex?
So, sticking to that same album and sticking to the genre bouncing a little bit, I went with Indian River, and this is a song that has a really cool reggae vibe to it on the studio cut. It's one of those songs where if you show someone a live version, you might not hear something that sounds like the next one. It's one they've experimented with a lot, but it showcases a little bit of everyone in the band in a really great way. Really beautiful lyrics. Again, I can't believe these songs were being written when these guys were so young and not a lot of life experience. But it's about coping with loss and seeking connections with nature. And there's even a beautiful part in the studio cut where it's in Sanskrit, and it's a beautiful passage that says, "That which pervades the entire body, know it to be indestructible. Nothing can destroy the imperishable soul." Like, how does someone that young come up with something like that? And it really taps into the spirituality you hear in some of their other songs that maybe isn't as bold and in your face as this song, but still prevalent throughout their entire catalog.
Yeah, it's absolutely mind blowing the stuff that they were doing on Moon Cabin. Like for a debut album, there's already evident, even though they didn't have the studio means and the production value that they currently do, they just there's so much polish on that album, and especially with Indian. I mean, that song is just so gorgeous, the studio version, and for an early work, I think it really stands out. And then what they do with it in a live setting, it's had so many evolutions and taken on so many different forms where there are some versions that are very sounding like they're straight from the 80s, more that lead into the reggae side of things. And then this summer I felt like was kind of a little bit of the best of both worlds. They melded the two approaches. Pete was still very present on the 80s style synths, but Rick was more forward with the reggae sound. And it just these versions from summer may be my new favorite.
And that's definitely something we're going to get into with future episodes here, talking about the evolution of the sound of the band. But like you said, they're never satisfied just sitting on some one sound. They are always tinkering and experimenting, and that's something that's exciting to show someone who's really, especially dived into the jam band scene for a long time, to have a band that really switches things up and even completely changes their genre is really exciting. And this is one of those songs where you can kind of tweak based off of your friend's feedback, or your friend, like, what do they like? You can find a version maybe that would suit them.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like the Build-A-Bear of songs.
Something like that.
So for my next pick, I picked So Ready, which I mentioned here in my intro to myself. That song is some days I think it is my favorite song by them just because it's arguably the most fun. It's so funky. If you get the chance to see it live, you're going to dance your face off. And I don't know, I can't think of anything like readily off the top of my head. And I have spent some time thinking about it of any other examples in recent music where I can pinpoint a bass that is that in your face on a studio track. And I don't think that I can. And it's one of the better parts of Goose is that Trevor is just always given free reign to shine, and it makes such a big difference in the sound and feel of this band that songs like So Ready really truly reach their pinnacle because Trevor is the kind of it's not what you see typically. He's the exception to the rule, I guess.
Yeah, when we were talking before this episode about the songs we picked and what we were thinking, you picked So Ready, which I'm surprised didn't come up till this late in this episode. It's got an argument for their catchiest song in the catalog, but my first notes when I saw you pick that was Trevor in all caps, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And he is the highlight of this song, in my opinion. And to what you said, he is such a highlight when you go see them live. He might have the most chill demeanor and he might not move around a lot, but he is a force up there and in the studio as well. And the last thing I just wanted to shout out on this one, actually, last two things I wanted to shout out on this one was, first of all, our podcast name, Slow Ready, is a version of So Ready that was also re-recorded in the studio. And it's just a slowed down electronic version of this song. Well, electronic sounding, I should say. It's got a really cool kind of arpeggio jam at the end, and it feels like an EDM vibe dance party to it. So check that out if that sounds like more your speed. And then the second thing was, again, going back to their production value when it comes to videos and things like that. This is a fully animated music video, and it looks great. There's so much GIF opportunity to this thing of the band members dancing around in animated form that has not been explored yet, in my opinion. So maybe we'll have to do that on our socials.
Yeah, it's a great video, and it's a good point. You don't see the animated style too often, other than like maybe like Daft Punk back in the day. But like it's really neat. Whenever Goose releases a video, you're like they're gonna put a bit more thought into this than the average band. So yeah, totally great call out there.
Great Daft Punk call out. That is definitely the vibe to the video.
Yeah, it fits.
So for my next pick, I'm torn between two different live cuts here. And I think I'm going to go stick to what I was talking about with Slow Ready a little bit and go with Creatures, which is another song that has a similar arpeggio vibe to it I was describing for Slow Ready. It kind of hits you in the face with that right away early on. And it's a super delayed, trippy feel to it, but it also feels like you're kind of going to the club to start the song. And the layers to this thing, it's almost got like dark sounding, sinister lyrics to it, but it really is just a bop. And you really get that classic funk feel subtly in the background. It almost sounds like what you'd expect like a normal Stratocaster to sound like when Rick's playing. And this is one where Peter, who normally plays the keys, is really driving that arpeggio riff. And it's an exploration into Rick, who often uses vocal effects on his voice. He's using some kind of auto tune, digital enhancement to his voice here. And it's really cool. You know, he obviously doesn't need it on his voice. Most vocalists probably don't who are professional musicians, but it really adds to the vibe of this thing. And it's an exploration into a more poppy sound for them. And it's really fun.
Absolutely. I think some people will be quick to give Rick crap about using vocal stuff, but like he never does it just to do it. Like he always, just like everything else he does with music, there's always a point, there's always a purpose. He's not, using these things overkill on every song. He picks his spots when it makes sense or when it elevates the vibe of the song. That's when he'll use it. And I think this song is a great example of that, of using it in tasteful ways where it truly does elevate the sound and work within the scope of the song. And I think that song also has a really interesting musical change from verse to chorus that sometimes when I'm listening to it, like I have a little bit of curiosity as how they got from one to the other, because they do work very well together, but they also sound like they're opposing a little bit. So it's so fun to just close your eyes and dance to, but at the same time there's a lot of complexity in this song as well.
It's a nice push and pull, like you said. And the nice thing with this song is it's been in the rotation live quite a bit, so you can find yourself a nice, long, crazy, rockier sounding version out there, or you can find a shorter, compact, poppy dance EDM feel kind of version of it. And like we said, you know your friend, try to cater to them. I think what might be a good idea. I think what might be a good idea for us is to pick some versions we like of these songs and put together a Nugs or Spotify playlist and share that in the show description here, Mike. What do you think?
Yeah, we can definitely get to work on that right away. It'd be
Awesome.
fun.
So what do we got next?
Yeah, so I believe this is my last pick here, actually. So best for last, I guess. I went with Travelers Part 1, and this has actually changed. My first song from earlier in the episode, Arcadia, would have been my pick until about 6 months ago. But that Travelers EP dropped, and I think it changed a lot of our minds here, because I'm going to stick to Travelers Part 1. I know it's an EP. I know there's two parts here, but Travelers Part 1 is the one I'm going to highlight. And I think that it was Peter who said online after they released this that it was the thing he was most proud of as far as their studio work goes. It was a new achievement for them, and I totally agree. And one of the things that stands out to me is that I frequently will be one to share Goose songs and videos with my dad, and he likes and appreciates most of them. Surprisingly, he's kind of a cool parent. But when I played this one for him, he was like, "You need to send me that link right away because I need to listen to it 1,000 times." So I think that was a very powerful feeling for me as far as like this song can be the convincer. Like if you have someone that's a little bit on the fence, maybe Travelers Part 1 is the thing that pushes them over the edge, because it's got so many layers, it's got so many nuances, it's so complex, and yet it's just pure and catchy, and it's on a very large scale, but it just every element of it works so very well, and it's just a joy to listen to. So I had to update my list and make this my new number one song to introduce someone to Goose with.
That's a really, really great pick. And once again, diving into the genre exploration, this really hits on that indie side of that indie groove the band describes himself as. It also really showcases some of like the world building you get out of a lot of these songs. And like you mentioned, it's a two-parter. The dynamics could not be different between the two, but part one is such a great introduction. In fact, just send someone that whole EP. Honestly, it's a great listen, and you get a really proggy feel to the entire thing. It's fantastic. I think as far as I'm concerned, it's the best studio stuff they've done. It's also their most recent, so it's a great sign. But the production value is insane on this, and it's another one of those where they released a video for the full EP of it. So if you're listening to Travelers Part 1 and you want to see kind of the video associated with it, they got a full 17-minute video of the whole EP on their YouTube, and it's trippy, it's beautiful, it's just really great production.
Absolutely. I totally agree on both those points. I mean, the production with Goose keeps getting better, and I feel like the more successful they get, we're just going to keep seeing them get to conquer even more new musical ground, because they're going to have more means and resources. And every release so far has just been an improvement upon the last, and as far as the scope of what they're able to go out there and take on. And also, what you mentioned is a great call out about Rick's world building. I mean, this song uses some familiar phrases from El Mig the Wise, which is a very big song in the Goose world. And as you get more familiar with the catalog, you kind of see these interwoven threads that Rick will put in multiple songs where there seems to be like quite a bit of overlap in the worlds that he is building. So yeah, it encompasses so many different aspects and angles of Goose that I think it's just kind of perfect for an intro track.
Yeah, for sure. It's unbelievably beautiful, and I should think about that next time I'm trying to introduce some of my cool hipster kind of friends who don't usually like jam band music, because that's the perfect one.
Absolutely. That's what it's there for.
So last pick here. This was tough. I had to make some tough cuts, but I wound up going with another live cut here, and I went with Silver Rising, which is probably the best song you'll ever hear about werewolves. As cheesy as that sounds,
Yeah.
it's just a really beautiful slow build song, and it's got this perfect balance of you know exactly what the song's about when you hear it once or twice. Like it's very clear it's about werewolves, and very, fantasy vibes, but also it's not beating you over the head with it. It's not super cheesy sounding or anything like that. Almost kind of reminds me of a Radiohead song in a lot of ways, where you see some similar stuff in their catalog. And this is one where, oftentimes we talked about, Trevor driving the song, or the guitar solos driving it. This one's really built on the vocals, in my opinion. The music's more of an atmosphere to it, and it's really, really beautiful, simple progression throughout the verses, and then you got this droning kind of walk down, almost like a death march sounding kind of chorus to the song, which kind of hints at the theme of, you're doomed, you're going into werewolf mode, as cheesy as that sounds. And then it hits you over the head with the crazy guitar solo, which is the climax of the song. And we went to our first show this summer, my wife and I, and this was the song. When she heard it, she was sold. Like, she was like, I'm all in. This is great.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to see that with how good of a song Silver Rising is. I mean, it's got that great minor feel throughout. The chords are relatively simple, but it's got a very atmospheric mode to it. And then the vocals at the end, especially, they are highlight worthy when Pete and Rick start overlapping with each other in the bridge at the end. It's just, I think that's one of the top 10 moments you can have as a Goose fan at a concert, is when you get to experience that for the first time. It really is magical. And it's also just, this song is just, again, like we've talked about 10 different songs, and almost all of them musically are wildly different to each other. So I mean, if there's a genre out there that you favor, you can find it in Goose's catalog, and this is just another banger of a song.
Oh yeah, it it's really like we've been saying all along, and want to reiterate one more time is, you know your friend, and if you know the catalog pretty well, there's obviously picks you can cater to towards someone, but it's really hard to find a person out there who wouldn't like anything in this catalog. They can offer you a little bit of everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so just wanted to shout out one last song here. I know we're not sticking to our 10, but this is Mike and I's first or last cut, whatever we want to describe that. Last one out, first one in if we had to make a cut. And that's Hot Tea, which is a
Yes.
big, big hit for this band. Very, very great crowd reception if you go to a show. It's also got a really killer studio cut, very funky, fun song. But even for a studio cut, it's pretty long. I think it's about 7 minutes long. So gives you a little bit of what you want from that funk side of the band. You got some cool horns and everything in the studio cut, and it's, you couldn't have more different sounding live versus studio, which is probably why we cut it from this, just because it would be hard to talk about that in any specific way. But just an absolutely killer song, whether you want to slow down studio and still funky, or really fast, crazy 25 minutes long, energy through the roof.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, me being a funk guy, Hot Tea is way up the list for me. It's definitely got, like, I've spent a lot of time in New Orleans. It's got a very New Orleans feel to it. Like, if you walk into bars or clubs down there, a lot of things would sound similar to that song. It's also got a very distinct, like, 70s vibe to it. It definitely borrows on a lot of the concepts from 70s, like disco and funk, but it's like remade and modernized to fit this particular band. And it's just a whole catchy wild ride. So yeah, Hot Tea is, I'm kind of mad I didn't include it in my original top five, to be honest with you, because it is a powerhouse of a song.
Yeah, it was tough to cut it, and going off of our personal experiences, there's no right or wrong answer here, but I really wanted to shout it out because it is just such a fantastic song, and I know it's a lot of people's highlight when they go to a show, and it can be anywhere as an opener, in the middle of the set, as an encore, closer, whatever, and it's always just a bop, and it always sounds right. So definitely wanted to shout that out. And that kind of leads me to some thoughts. We were talking before this episode about whether introducing someone to live cuts would be too much or studio is the way to go. And, that's obviously a debate about knowing your friend, like we've talked about. But I just wanted to kind of dive into it a little bit about what we think, whether it's better to go in with live cuts or studio cuts, or what the balance to be struck there is for a band that has such a big following, and their live production is such a big part of who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that I think that both of us have started to see the other's side of things on the argument scale here a little bit. Because when I was, a teenager, I would always kind of start with a new jam band by, I got to listen to studio cuts so that when I go see them live, I'm not totally lost. I at least know what the basic structure of the song is, and can therefore figure out when a jam is starting. So that was kind of always my approach. And I did the same thing with Goose. But Alex recently pointed out to me the side of, like, well, the studio cuts differ quite a lot from what they're playing live. And the more I thought about it, and how if you get to the point of obsession that me and Alex are at with Goose the band, which I hope everyone does end up at this place, you're going to be spending most of your time with the live catalog. And so from that side of things, I've started to see a lot more validity to maybe just dumping into the deep end of the pool and going with the live stuff first. It definitely presents some advantages, but yeah, but Alex, why don't you tell me a little bit more about what you've been telling me all this week about how the live cuts are the way to go?
It's been evolving, like you said. I hadn't really listened to the studio cuts very much until we were getting ready to do this podcast, and I'm seeing a lot of the merit to listening to the studio cuts. It's definitely the easiest way to learn the lyrics and the structure of a song, like you said. Oftentimes, it's a little trickier to understand the lyrics in a live recording, or the structure of the song is changed, and you might have a long jam between verses or something like that. And there's also a lot of really cool subtleties to the studio cuts that they can't really emulate in a live setting all the time. But, you know, we've obviously been exposed to a lot of different jam band music. So I feel like if it's someone who's been exposed to music, like they're a fan of Fish or something like that, or the Disco Biscuits or whatever, they're used to long jams and they're used to listening to live cuts. I think that's probably the way to go to get started, just because that's what they want. They want to know about what it's like to see the band live. Typically, if you're following these bands, you're trying to go to concerts, and so. But I think it was really rewarding and fun to kind of go back and listen to a lot of these cuts from the studio after the fact, and the band obviously wants to make that a priority, and they do a great job with it. So I'm excited to see what they do with it. I know there's some rumors about upcoming albums here for next year maybe, and they're going to do a terrific job on them. So there's definitely merit. And if it's someone that is used to listening to shorter songs, or they only listen to the radio, and maybe you think there's something catchy enough for your friend who is typically like more of a pop fan or a general rock fan, then studio's probably the way to go.
Yeah, and I think the great thing about this is that we both approach these songs from different perspectives. I started mostly studio, he started mostly live. We still ended up becoming the same rabid fans. So it's two sides of the same coin. You can't go wrong when the songwriting and catalog and music is all just this great. So either way you go about it, you can't lose when you're listening to Goose, I guess is the moral of the story here.
Yeah, definitely. And we'd be curious to hear you guys' thoughts. So if you wanted to send us an email, send us one at slowreadypod@gmail.com. We always love to hear from fellow fans, and we had so much fun debating. We made a podcast, so maybe we can include you guys in on that too. And just one last reminder to follow us on socials. We're on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, X. I will never fully call it X. That sounds so wrong. I'm going to call it Twitter. And be sure to follow our podcast wherever you normally subscribe. And we're looking forward to releasing a lot of cool stuff here in the future. We've got big plans, huge outline of potential episodes that we can make. So, a lot to look forward to here. And I hope that you've enjoyed the Slow Ready podcast. We'll catch you next time.